It's like dreaming awake, you know, which is what Pauline Kael says movies are about anyway. They're dreaming awake. You go in there and you have this dream. It plays out in front of you. And the horror movie, it always has seemed to me, is almost like the distillation of what that experience is supposed to be. It's the perfect awake dream. And when it's done well, you believe it. And when you come out, paradoxically, instead of feeling more afraid, you feel like you got rid of something you had to get rid of.
He dreams awake and creates perfect awake nightmares. Italian director Dario Argento shows us 2 examples and a sampling of his techniques. Meanwhile, American producer Brian Usna takes the unbelievable to outrageous extremes in his films inspired by the stories of H.P. Lovecraft and Mary Shelley. The bird with the crystal plumage, the cat-o'-nine tails, 4 flies on gray velvet, deep red, unseen, creepers, opera, Suspiria, Inferno, and 2 evil eyes, shot in America with the creator of Night of the Living Dead. His name is Argento. Dario Argento. He is the Italian master of horror, laughing at the conventional rules of filmmaking with unconventional camera moves and illogical story structures. His films are sweet experiences of complete madness and unrelenting terror. As a movie critic for an Italian newspaper, Argento fell in love with American horror films. His stylish use of color, movement, and music has made him one of the most influential horror directors to ever step behind a camera. Even some of his distributors consider his films dangerous, and they take liberties in cutting them. But he has an even worse enemy.
No, in the sense also, I am disgusted by sense. No, because also I'm disgusted by people have, he says, I become sense. Why? Like I becomes a cat head. This is my, I love this. Why I love this? This is the worst things in life. I think now the worst things to be censored. Really disgusting people.
Don't be afraid. I'm Inspector Geiger. I want to help you. I get you!
I won't hurt you.
I don't want you here.
I know your mother was bad. But I want to help. You don't have to worry about the mirrors anymore. It's all over.
me, in hell, if I'm Dante Alighieri, in the bottom of the hell, no Luciferus, but the censorship and the chief of the distribution, the major company, cut the picture. This is the deep, red.
I think horror is biological, terror is psychological. If you're going to do a thriller or you're going to do terror, it's all up here. It's psycho. But horror is when you see the flesh.
In 1985, Brian Usna released Reanimator upon the world. Things have never been quite the same. The carefully measured elements of spectacular horror, combined with maddening humor, have made Reanimator one of the most popular horror films ever unleashed upon an audience. The Mad Doctor theme was taken by Usna and director Stuart Gordon from a short story by H.P. Lovecraft. They turned it into a statement on going too far. 4 years later, Usna set out to prove that too much is not enough by directing Bride of Reanimator.
Yes. Parts. I've never done whole parts.
Yes, Doctor. It's Herbert West. What are you thinking? How do you feel? You?
It's true that Reanimator had this over-the-top black comedic element from the very start, which was part of what made it so successful. I believe where that comes from, and I know where it came from in the making of the movie, was very early on. I was very concerned that as the producer of it and as being financially at risk, I was very concerned that it not be one of those low-budget movies that doesn't go far enough and just ends up being sort of mediocre and unremarkable. So Stuart Gordon and myself, along with the effects people, and we're very concerned that it go as far as it can, that we absolutely make it very explicit so that no matter what, it was gonna deliver.
I'm very disappointed in you. You steal the secret of life and death, and here you are trysting with the bubble-headed co-ed. You're not even a second-rate scientist.
Oh, Mr. West, I'm actually glad to see you. It saves me the trouble of having to send for you.
You'll never get credit for my discovery. Who's going to believe a talking head? Get a job in a sideshow.
I wonder why an intelligent young man like yourself should make such a foolish, fatal mistake of coming here to challenge me.
Oh, I have a plan.
So do I.
The whole idea of the creator turning away from his creation, which I think is what kind of existentialism is all about, is that we have this whole century in which there's, nobody believes in anything because it's kind of like God's decided that it stinks and he's quit dealing with it. And I think that's what we tried to do with The Bride.
You are making a big mistake.
Do you believe that dead is dead, Dr. West?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I am talking about my wife!
No. You can't go in here.
Move.
No.
Move! You butcher!
How dare you judge my work?
Work? Was my wife your work?
Don't lay your guilt on me,
What?
Lieutenant. Your wife died of multiple contusions to the head from a blunt stroke. Multiple blows
She
to the
fell.
head. Ha! She fell, did she?
That was not my fault!
Some directors of genre pictures are very successful at creating a feeling of fright and fear, and they don't, and that stuff usually doesn't depend on the special effects. I think the special effects are more for just pure delight.
All right, Billy. The game's over.
Society, Buechner's directorial debut, develops an ominous theme involving the evil that lurks among the rich and powerful. Don't drop by one of their parties unexpected, for they are not like the rest of us. And when the cream of society's crop are alone with each other, they are different, very different.
No lose. Ever.
What's going on?
Maybe everybody that's involved in making horror movies that are, approaching or in middle age are all have a bad dose of arrested adolescence.
Jennifer? Thank God.
I've always enjoyed monsters, and I like to scare people. No question about that. But I also respond very strongly to the fantasy element.
What better fantasy element to explore than the domain of female vampires? 3 unusual and tantalizing examples are shown. Then we will meet a special effects wizard who makes fantasy come true, sometimes with the simplest of solutions. In 1896, Dracula was published. 26 years later, Nosferatu was released into film theaters. But once Bela Lugosi performed the lead role, the powerful image of the vampire was secured forever. Masculine, ageless, majestic, and overflowing with psychological and religious imagery. Female vampire. She presents something very different from the male vampire. She becomes the woman every man wants, but knows he shouldn't touch. The seductive Polish-born Ingrid Pitt was largely responsible for establishing the lore of the female vampire. The house that dripped blood presented Pitt with an unusual problem, convincing her film director that he himself was not a vampire.
You see? Nothing happened.
I can't understand it. Wait a minute. This isn't my cloak.
No. This one is.
Carla, no. No. No, Carla. Carla, don't put that on. You'll turn into a vampire. Carla. Carla, please.
We loved your film so much, we wanted you to become one of us forever. Welcome to the club.
Carla! Carla! Don't be ridiculous. Carla, this is going too far. Carla! Carla! Carla!
2 years after her 1973 appearance in Playboy magazine, Anulka appeared with Marion Morris in Vampires, Daughters of Dracula. Though neither of these vampires had fangs, their victims died with a smile.
Can you give us a lift?
And above all else, in the company of 2 very charming ladies. It's almost too good to be true.
Nothing's too good to be true. The only trouble is life's too short.
you? Well, that's strange.
What?
My watch has stopped. Look. That's never happened before.
Gentlemen, I give you Katrina.
In 1986, Grace Jones updated the female vampire in Vamp. Her vampire was like no other ever before seen on the screen, and yet she projected the same seductive quality. Modern horror films rely heavily upon the talent and imagination of special effects artists who take the spectacular and unbelievable and make it very real. On the outskirts of Hollywood lies XFX Studio, where special effects artist Steve Johnson designs the objects that nightmarish films are made of. Steve is part of the new breed of special effects artists who are enjoying a prominent role in today's horror entertainment industry. Once Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi commanded the horror audience's respect. Now it is the special effects artist who receives the praise.
This is stupid, but let's just... you want to make sure it blasts really good. Right now the business is so crowded. Things have really changed, but even when I started first getting into it, if you don't always want to push further and always want to try out something new and approach it from a different angle, then you're not really going to have much of a fighting chance in the industry, because there are so many people in this business. And it's interesting because now it's a much more of a legitimate thing than when I first came out here. When I first came out here, it was really nothing to do. I mean, 11 years ago, the state of the art of the public knowledge of this kind of stuff was practically non-existent. And so it was kind of a strange thing, and there weren't all that many people getting into it. In that respect, I was lucky. But now there are monster magazines all over the place, television shows like this one, and kids across America can see it and point it to their parents and say, that's what I want to do for a living, and it's a legitimate thing now. I think people have gotten very sensitized or desensitized to effects, and in a way, it's not like an amazing thing. They don't, I mean, it's amazing to them, of course, but they expect it now. I mean, I think when people go to a movie these days, more often than not, they feel cheated if they don't see something amazing in the film. It's like, where were the special effects? Like, let's go down the way and see another movie. I just wasted $7 and there wasn't a single effect in it. I think my favorite person would have to be Rob Bottin. Probably because he comes up with the wildest, most different ideas, and I think he chooses his projects very well, which is really important. He is an excellent designer, and as I said before, pretty much these days, I feel, and this is a broad understatement, but I feel anyone can do the basics. So now how I judge people's talent or competency is in design. As I said before, I think that's really the only true art left in this business, and that the keys to all of the things that used to be secrets are in 100 books these days, and videos and anything. So now the art really shows through because people have to be good designers in order to stand out in this business, and I think Rob is an excellent designer. He's really good. He did Legend, well, actually it was released as Legend, and did the demon makeup on Tim Curry, which is one of the most beautiful designs I've ever seen makeup effects-wise.
Perhaps the complexities and problems of modern society have caused audiences to demand increasingly sophisticated cinematic illusions. Special effects to shock, humble, and even outrage those that pay to see the films.
Ready to go. Bill, if I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times, get to work on time. What? You came out of frame. Let's do that again, real quick. Okay, it's okay. Oh, I'm hitting him in his hair. This is a guy who builds a bat, expects me to hit an actor with it, but he can't take it with himself. Here's the effect right here on the hand. Bam. Oh, wow. There's a chamber in it that's filled with blood. So when you, the idea is when you hit, it spatters blood. And it's supposedly soft.
Enthusiasm is actually very, very important. The market is probably pretty much flooded right now. I mean, as I said before, this is a legitimate thing, and kids love it. I mean, it's a real cool thing now, and so there's a lot of kids coming out here from all over wanting to do this, and there's a lot of work, obviously. So it's working, it's coming together. Okay, what we have here is a mechanical understructure for a close-up head for a Cool Whip commercial that my studio built at the end of 1988. It's for a Cool Whip commercial. It's a talking cow. They wanted the face to articulate the words very, very well. A little bit better than Mr. Ed, so we built a mechanical cow for them. We did two cows. We did a full body that could be seen with real cows, and then we did this one as an insert piece. The reason for that was we needed to get so much articulation into the face that it would have been very difficult for us to articulate the full body as well as we did this one. We had much more access. For Nightmare on Elm Street 4, what we handled was the death sequence of Freddy at the very end of the film. I don't remember exactly how many. It involved probably 10 or 12 different effects, all on different scales. The basic concept of the sequence was that all of Freddy's victims from the past are getting back at him by punching their way out of his body from the inside out. So we approached it in a more surrealistic sense than a bloody sense. We wanted to give the impression more that these things, there were arms, legs, torsos, heads growing out of them rather than breaking out of them. We didn't really want to spill a lot of blood in this. One reason being because of fear of censorship. Also, we thought it had a more fantastic feel to it this way. This is obviously the biggest thing we did. It's a full scale. It's probably about 18 feet tall from the groin to the top of the neck, Freddy body. And we actually got actors and actresses in there to try to punch their way out of it. And we intercut this with smaller models, actually on Robert Englund, the Freddy Krueger character. And they used a lot of smoke, a lot of Dutch angles, a lot of moving cameras to kind of conceal the fact that we were cutting between large and small scale props. And it worked out pretty well. It's more like a machine gun barrage of cuts in the final edit, and I think it worked out pretty good. This is an effect that we designed actually for one of the very last shots where a face grows out of Robert Englund's face, Freddy's face. At the end of the film, his face actually divides, bifurcates into two faces. So we had kind of a mechanical device and a vacuum effect happening. For a lot of reasons, the effect was cut from the film, as is often the case in this kind of stuff. There you can see the face forming. We never really got it to a more finished stage than this. In this version of it, we ended up simplifying the effect when we actually took it to set. They felt that it just probably didn't go along the same lines as the rest of the stuff we had done, so this one never made it. Disney approached me this summer about doing a mechanical spider, a blue screen puppet. This is where a lot of times what we do works hand in hand with optical enhancement. We wanted to make this actually look like a real spider. So in order to be able to operate it more easily, we built it about 3 times oversized. This actress, Lindsay Frost, comes to a point in the film when she deteriorates in front of camera. So we used several tricks. One of them involved her arm falling off as she reaches out toward the actor, and Treat Williams in this case. This is again from Dead Heat. This scene was eventually cut out of the film, but it's a pretty funny scene. There's the big giant birthday cake gets wheeled in. It's Joe Piscopo's birthday, and a dancing skeleton pops up out of it. Eventually wore a nice sexy bikini. And what we did here is we had an actress, it was Linnea Quigley in this case, wearing a black velvet suit, shot against black, with direct attachments to movement points of the skeleton. For instance, her head had a rod attached directly to a helmet that went directly into the back of the skull, so when she moved her head, the skeleton's head moved. Rods come out of the elbows of the skeleton, and she grabs onto the rods which had handles on them as well to move the wrists. Her hips have pivot points attached to the skeleton hips. So basically all she had to do was dance in a very exaggerated manner, and the skeleton would dance as well. Karo syrup, thinned with a little bit of water. Food coloring, not just red though, you have to put a little bit of green and a little bit of yellow in there to give it that kind of brownish tint. I think it reads better on film actually and looks a little bit more visceral if it's not bright red. If you prick your finger and look at it under bright light, it's pretty vibrant red, but I think it's a little bit more visceral and more gut-wrenching to see a little dark brown to it, because that's the way it starts to look when it's coagulated, and I think somehow that triggers something in people's heads that makes them think it's a little more disgusting. And then you just need something that will make it a little more opaque. You could put baby powder in it if you suspend it and shake it up before you use it. That's probably the easiest home recipe for blood, but don't put it on your pancakes, kids. What pump?
Black,
Dave, Here, you just pump one, Dave. Dave, you just pump one.
Okay, no,
Okay.
no, John. I got it.